Sometimes when we read the words of those who have been more than conquerors, we feel almost despondent. I feel that I shall never be like that. But they won through step, by little bits of wills, little denials of self, little inward victories, by faithfulness in very little things. They became what they are. No one sees these little hidden steps. They only see the accomplishment. But even so, those small steps were taken. There is no sudden triumph of spiritual maturity. That is the work of the moment. No, if you're wondering, you have not come in on the middle of the podcast. We have just decided that we are going to start the podcast this season with quotes that we come across weekly. A lot of times, Kathy and I find things during the week quotes, things that we've read that we want to share, but we're not sure how to work them in maybe to the podcast. So we thought we would begin each podcast with something that we think is valuable. And I thought this was so valuable. I came across it several years ago. Actually, it was in context with one of the Proverbs that we talked about last week, the Proverbs 29:25, about the fear of man brings a snare, but he who trusts in the Lord will be exalted. And I think sometimes that act of trust is a little step-by-step kind of thing that we do. It's not sometimes a great leap of faith, but it's those little bitty steps that we take along the way that help convince us that, yes, of course, we can trust in God, that what he promises, he will continue to bless us with. And I just loved the quote because everyone sees the end result of someone's faith and trust. But sometimes, most of the time, we don't see those little bits of wills, those little denials of self, those things that come along and help us in little small ways that lead to a big result. So that was something that I came across. Amy Carmichael is the name of the person who said it. And I just loved it. And, sometimes when we begin these podcasts and we say, hello, welcome to Looking Up, and I always feel like I want to say it like Mrs. Doubtfire and say, hello, but then I don't, because that would be embarrassing. So welcome to Looking Up. I felt like this quote was kind of encompasses things that we like to talk about and what we're trying to encourage others to do. Take those little steps, always look up to the Lord and live our lives in such a way that honors him and shows that we trust him. So my name is Carla Moore. I'm one of your hosts, and with me is Kathy Pollard. She is your other host, and we are welcoming you to Looking Up. This is season 4, episode 2. So how are things going in Bowling Green today?
Oh, they're going really good. That was a great quote. I love that, and I'm excited now just to figure out every week what you're going to come up with, and I think it'll be fun. I will say it's a little swampy here. Neil and I went out to harvest first thing this morning, and it was just so humid and muggy, and you can feel it in the air. And I can see it all around us too, because it's like the jungle is encroaching. Our property is surrounded by woods, and you can just see the growth and the greenery just kind of wanting to come over the fence onto our property, and everything is just growing like crazy. It's so humid, but
you're breathing water, huh?
We are definitely breathing water. Yes, but we're getting a lot of things in now, and I've planted a couple of different things this year. I can't remember if I've shared this already, but I planted Mediterranean cucumbers, which are a little bit smaller and almost kind of sweet. They're not very bitter, so we're already harvesting those, and I've been making sort of like a quick pickle with those, just slicing them up and putting them in some apple cider vinegar and a little bit of sugar in the fridge. And those are really good and crisp, perfect for summer. And we've got jalapenos coming in, so I've been making some cowboy candy with that. And we planted a pepper.
Wait, what is cowboy candy?
It's like a pickled jalapeno. It's sugar and apple cider vinegar and a little bit of garlic powder, and you can put cayenne pepper in there, but I feel like the jalapenos are spicy enough. But you boil that and you pour it over the sliced jalapenos, so it's like a sweet heat thing. It's really good on just about anything: burgers, hot dogs, pizza,
baked potatoes, maybe
baked potatoes. Yeah. So, and then we planted some peppers that look like jalapenos, but they're not spicy. They're called gotcha peppers or aha peppers. I can't remember which one it is. But it's just because they look like they'd be hot, but they're not. So they have the flavor, but not the heat. So I've just been slicing those up and putting them in the freezer, just trying to, oh, and zucchini, of course.
Hmm.
So I'm shredding that and putting it in the freezer. I've already made some zucchini bread, but it wasn't really good. It was kind of dry.
Hmm.
Wasn't that great? Oh, and I was going to show you, look at these. I also planted, these are called lemon squash. Are they not the
Oh,
most adorable little things
I
you've
would have
ever
thought they were
seen?
lemons.
Yeah, so they taste just like regular yellow squash, except they're the shape of a little lemon, and they're
Yeah,
so cute
to
hanging on the
decorate with
vines.
those.
Yeah, they're beautiful. So this is our first time. I've grown lemon cucumbers before,
Hmm.
which are round and yellow like this, but this is my first time growing lemon squash, and they're so cute.
Is your lemon tree still in your house?
Yes,
Is
in
it
fact,
putting lemons out?
like gangbusters.
Really?
Yeah, a couple of the bigger lemons that started out in the winter are just now starting to turn yellow. That takes several months to happen, and I've got tons of other lemons coming in, so it's really doing really good.
I feel like I want to go shopping at your house. Do you
I
still have the farm stand?
do, but I haven't done anything with it. I haven't even renewed my cottage license
Yeah. Well,
yet. I
y'all had
printed,
camp and stuff going on. So,
yeah, and if you don't renew online by regardless of when you submitted it last year, so I don't even think I did it last year until about May or June. And I thought I had a full year and then I would just renew it online. But if you don't renew online by April,
start
you
all
have to
over.
print off the paperwork
Mhm.
and start all over and list out everything you're going to make and mail it in. It's not, they don't really make it all that convenient.
Yeah.
So I've only gone as far as printing it off and haven't even filled it out or sent it in yet. So
Well, is that something you enjoyed last year?
I did, except that we never got any traffic. So it was
Yeah.
kind of, it ended up being this huge amount of trouble because we had it down by the end of the drive and we'd have to go down there first thing in the morning and stock it.
Hmm.
And then in the evening, bring it all in for like no customers. And I
Yeah.
think we ended up with a total of three customers last summer. And one of them was my daughter-in-law. So
Well, okay. Maybe I wonder if you put a sign at the edge or at that intersection down there that turns on Motley.
yeah, Janelle made us a huge sign to put down there for this season, but like I said, we haven't even
Yeah.
put anything out there yet. You just have to, I kind of envision doing like sourdough bread and things like that too, but I don't want to make a bunch of things that don't last if
Yeah.
people aren't going to come by and buy them,
Hmm.
you know. But we'll see.
Well, hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I noticed you posted a couple pictures of the new church building,
Mm,
and it's coming along.
it really is.
It's going to be
Yeah.
beautiful. When
Yeah.
is it supposed to be finished?
Well, originally they told us December, but now they're saying November. So it actually got
Nice.
pushed forward, which surprises me. I think it'd be the other way around. But
Hmm.
so just a few months from now, we should be, Lord willing, moving over there to the new location.
Well, it'd be nice to have that done before the holidays because
Yes.
you'll be so busy in December anyway. It'd be nice to get that done before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited for y'all.
Thank
Well,
you.
we had a surprise, a really big surprise. I know I told you about Micah and Courtney having a
Yeah.
baby, and I don't think I told everyone. I know I told you that they were having a little boy because I told you that we are going to have two little boys.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't tell everybody, but I told you two little boys. So Jake and Les are having a little boy. They've told us his name. They've announced it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went down last Friday to take care of Livy while Courtney went to have the anatomy scan, is what they call it. And so we were at home with Livy when they walked back in the door, and they had this stunned look on their face because they had been told at another ultrasound that they were having a boy. And they walked in and they said, "Well, guess what? It's a girl." So when they had the more detailed anatomy scan, they found out that it is indeed a girl. And it was just funny. They were thrilled because they
Okay,
love
good.
yeah, no disappointment
Yeah.
at all, but just surprised because they've been thinking about boy names and boy clothes, and they were getting a room ready for him. And I don't think they had done any painting or anything like that, but So we're going to have a little girl and a little boy in November. We were expecting two little boys. So,
When you told me that, my first thought was, aren't you glad they found out now instead
yeah.
of much, much later or
Yeah.
even at the birth,
Hmm.
after they've got all the clothes, all the
Yeah.
the
Well,
room done up all boyish and
yeah, and that happens. I know
yeah.
Nate and Katie Miller, they had twins a couple of years ago, and I'm thinking that I can't remember what they were told to begin with, but it turns out they were two boys. I think they were told they were girls, and I think it was pretty late when they found out. So that was a surprise. But anyway, no complaints, no disappointment, just surprises. It was fun.
Yeah. And
Excited about that.
how old is Jackson now?
Jackson is 7, and he's the
Okay.
only boy so far.
And
He'll be 8 in a couple of weeks, in about 6 weeks.
so he'll be 8 when his
Right.
first other
Boy
boy
cousin.
cousin will be born.
Yeah.
That's pretty big age
Yeah.
gap.
Yeah. But it's funny in our family on the Moore side, Brandy is the oldest cousin of Jordan and Jacob and Micah's cousins, and she's the only girl, but they all adored her.
Yeah.
So they just loved her, and she was a good bit older than a lot of them. And so I'm not worried about Jackson. He loves babies anyway. It's funny. We had him this week. We picked him up Saturday and kept him until just this morning. John took him back. And on Monday, Micah brought Livy. He had a job close by. And so Jackson, he pretends to be a tough guy. But when I told him that Livy was coming, he said, yay. And then I just have all the sweetest little pictures of him trying to make her laugh and rolling around on the floor. He was a little bit much for her at the beginning. I mean, she's been around him several times, but she's 2 and he's 7. So he was, all noise and boy. And but
Mm.
anyway, it was fun. We had a good time. He shot a bee gun, we rode bikes, we had ice cream, he had a little desk. I'm sitting at my desk. And so he had 2 boxes that he put up below my feet. And he put this little glass jar full of pens, and he had a calculator that he pretended was his computer. So we had fun. And we read at night. Last time he was here, we read My Side of the Mountain. This time we read On the Far Side of the Mountain.
Hmm.
So anyway, that's what I've been doing this week.
Sounds like a
Been
perfect
busy.
week.
It has been
Mhm.
great.
Did you able to get some thrifting in there?
Well, I took him one day, and he found him a Nerf gun, but I did find something and
Oh,
I brought it in. I don't know what it is about pasta makers, but this was brand new in the box. It's a KitchenAid attachment
oh yeah.
with pasta maker. So
Mhm.
there's 3 different ones of these, and one of them makes spaghetti, one makes um what's the thicker fettuccine, and then one makes lasagna noodles. So I couldn't pass that by. It's like
Yeah.
$150 thing in the store. So I thought,
Hmm.
I'll try it out. I'm not ever going to turn down homemade pasta.
You have to let us know how it turns out.
Yeah, I'll
When are you
try.
gonna make it?
I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe I'll do that this afternoon. No, I probably won't, but I'll try it sometime. Your hair
Well,
looks really good. You said you got another cut.
thanks. Yeah, I got it cut again yesterday because I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to have about monthly haircuts to encourage the
Encourage.
growth. And
Mm-hmm.
as this grows out at the top, I want this to get short and meet in the middle.
Yeah.
And
Well,
she
pretty soon it might
also
hit your ears.
she also put some long layers in the back and kind of textured it on the end so it wouldn't hang as heavy
Mm-hmm.
at the bottom. It'd have a little more movement to it.
Looks like
So
she straightened it too.
she did. She straightened it. It'll never look
Mm-hmm.
like this again.
That's what I always think when I come home from the hairdresser. I'm like, well, enjoy it because it won't ever look like this. And
Yeah.
tomorrow, for sure, it will not.
No. Yeah. Well, and I was trying to keep it, like this for this podcast recording. And then we went
Mm-hmm.
outside to harvest and I was like, that humidity was like, so
Yeah,
all the under little pieces are frizzing out already.
yeah, it still looks good.
Thank you.
I like it.
Thanks. I was going to share this little frame picture. This is from Cam Lawyers. Can you see that, or is there a glare
Yeah,
on it?
it's a
This
little
cute
bit of a
little.
glare. What does it say?
It says, "I'm a daughter of a king who's not moved by this world."
Mm,
And anyways, this sweet little print that she had wrapped and given to me last night, but she accompanied it with a sweet little handwritten note about the podcast.
really?
And
What'd she
yeah,
say?
she's always such an encouraging, just how much she appreciates it, and it brightens her days. And she's always real good about every now and then she'll come just make a point to say something to me about it. And, she's that kind of person anyway. I feel like some of the things that we talk about today, I'll probably bring her name up because she's, people are naturally drawn to her because she's interested in others. And in fact, she's doing a Bible study with some ladies each week, and I was able to sit in on it this week. And she's talking to some women that they've come from very difficult situations, and they've landed in some difficult situations, and so she's talking to them about comfort from God and what that looks like, and trusting in the Lord. And I was just sitting there watching and learning from her, just her demeanor, her genuine love for these women. I mean, just walking out of there, I felt encouraged, of course, by her lesson, but also just learning from her as a person. And I feel like that happens every week. You haven't even announced what we're talking about yet, but whatever we're going to be talking about, I feel like something happens during the week that relates somehow. And I felt like she was just this living example of some of the things that we're going to end up talking about today. So.
That's good.
Yeah.
I bet she's been involved in those little steps and little self-denials and things that has ended up making her who she is today.
Yes, exactly.
Well, you have told me that you have the crud in your throat, and I feel like I've got the frog in my throat. So we apologize in advance for the very unprofessional sounds that come from us, but we can't help it.
We can't help
I
it.
wonder how people who really are professional, I guess they edit the coughs out.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, that's not going to happen here. So we're a small time operation.
Very small.
Yeah. As in you and me.
That's right. As in
well, you do
the
a really
person.
good job.
Thank you. Technology hates me, or I'm allergic to it. Either one, but doing the best I can.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter.
Remember when we would put those pleas out every now and then last year? Like, if anybody wants to volunteer to do the techie side for us, we got crickets.
Yeah. I think probably most women our age don't know much about tech to begin with anyway, but
excuse me.
Yeah. I didn't even hear that.
You did?
It seems like Zoom automatically, like loud noises, it blocks out. Oh. I've noticed that before. Have you noticed that?
Well, except for my barky laugh, because I've heard a couple people now, a couple people have commented that my bark of a laugh, while they were driving or while they were doing something, almost startled them into a heart attack. So apparently it doesn't tone that down.
Barky.
Me neither, but apparently I hope I don't kill anybody with it.
That'd be a first.
Please.
Well, I know you need to keep this kind of short today. You've got person in your house, and John is on his way back from dropping off Jackson. What is it about us that we don't like? It's like we put this podcast out for everyone to hear, and yet we don't want anyone to hear it while we're doing it. Yeah. I don't understand that. But we both feel that way.
Plus all the extra noise of just living and moving, and Neil is busy making noisy things.
Is he whistling? Can you hear him?
He was whistling when we were chatting before we hit record, but I don't hear anything right now.
All right. Well, are you ready, or do you have anything else?
I think I'm ready.
Okay. I didn't set a timer, but if you are ready, we will jump into our topic. And
let's go for it.
Okay. So speaking of hot and sweaty and icky and breathing the air outside and water, we're going to talk a little bit about something that takes place in December, and maybe it'll make us feel a little bit of a breath of fresh air. This is something that I thought about several years ago, and I tend to, when I have the TV on, I'm usually doing something. And so I listen more than I watch. And sometimes you hear things better that way, or you pay attention. Sometimes I find myself with commercials that if I ever am sitting there and watching them, I'm like, oh, that's what that commercial is for, because I've heard it many times, but I've never seen it. But this is kind of the other way around. I heard it and didn't see it, and it really made an impact on me. And it came from the Christmas Carol, which is John's absolute favorite Christmas movie.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many different versions of it.
Which
He
one's his
likes
favorite?
he likes the old one. Well, there's one with George C. Scott, I think,
That's Neil's
which is not
favorite.
the oldest one, but it's one of the older ones, and it's a good
That's
one.
that's Neil's favorite, and he the whole time the boys were growing up insisted that that was our Christmas Eve
Yeah.
movie tradition,
Hmm.
which we watched every single year. And he didn't find out until very recently that he was the only one that liked it.
So you tortured yourselves for however many years.
That's
Maybe it
right.
wasn't torture. You just didn't enjoy it as much.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, It's a Wonderful Life tends to be ours. Maybe not Christmas Eve, but that's kind of what we watch. But this comes from the Christmas Carol. And you remember the scene where Fred, Ebenezer Scrooge's nephew, is with his friends, and I believe they're eating Christmas Eve dinner. And Fred has encountered his Uncle Scrooge earlier in the day and invited him to come, and Scrooge rebuffed him and basically made fun of him for celebrating Christmas in any way. And so they were around the table talking about Scrooge and just kind of some his friends that were at the table with him and his wife, they were saying, why in the world would you why do you have any patience with him? Why do you invite him year after year? Why do you have anything nice to say about him? Because he's miserable. He's just a wretched person to be around. And what he says, this is what has made such an impression on me. Fred says, his offenses carry their own punishment, and I have nothing to say against him.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, that's one of those things that you just kind of have to think about it and let it settle and let it sink in. But his offenses carry their own punishment.
Mm-hmm.
And it got me to thinking about what kinds of things am I doing in my own life that I'm shooting myself in the foot. And that's one of the ways that we might say it. Or I'm just hurting myself. I'm ruining my own happiness. I'm robbing myself of joy because I do these things, and I'm making the choice and not being intentional about making a different choice. So there were a couple of different things that I thought about that two different areas, I guess. One of them, briefly, is that I think we should be more like Fred. And how do we respond? How do we react to someone who's miserable? How do we respond to someone who's angry? Because I think it's ironic. I see this in myself that I am very impatient with impatient people. Like, they drive me nuts. I'm super
Mm-hmm.
impatient with them. And then one day I thought, seriously, you are being exactly like what you're mad at them for being. It's just dumb. But we might be grouchy with grouchy people or angry
Mm-hmm.
with angry people. I think it's a little bit natural, but if you really think about it, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So when faced with someone like this, who is miserable or who makes others miserable, stingy like Scrooge, how do we react to them? And I thought about Romans 12:10 that says, love one another with brotherly love, with brotherly affection, and outdo one another in showing honor. And just a couple of weeks ago, Jacob brought this up in a sermon. He brought this passage up, and I just kind of was looking at the definition of the words. And that outdo means to go first and lead the way. And I loved that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that would be a whole great topic in itself. Outdo one another, or go first and lead the way in showing honor to other people. Goes on to say, don't be haughty, don't pay back with evil, but be at peace with all men. And if your enemy's hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink, for in so doing, you will heap coals of fire on his head. And I used to think that meant that you're burning them up, you're
Mm-hmm.
burning them. We used to say that when we were kids. Ooh, he burned you.
Mm-hmm.
But really you're softening their hearts when you do good to them. You're maybe turning a mirror on their soul when you respond and you act the way that you should, regardless of how they act, rather than just being rude and being ugly. And so I thought it would be something to talk about briefly about how we should be like Fred instead of Scrooge, obviously.
Well, the verses that came to my mind with that side of it was when Jesus talks about how we treat those that we consider enemies. And I know that seems a little bit strong, but I think we could easily insert those types of personalities. And when I think about that, I think about people that are, kind of off-putting,
Hmm.
um, prickly. My tendency is just to give them a wide berth.
Right.
And, I might smile at them when I see them, but I'm not going to go out of my way to want to hang out with them. Or
Hmm.
when really, the, the example that you gave of Fred, he kept inviting his uncle anyway.
Hmm.
And boy, how easy it is to think about those types of people in our own church families, maybe that are just not very pleasant to be around for whatever reason. And maybe we don't think about inviting them into our homes, or if we're a group of people going out to dinner, or to be involved in a project with us, when that's really what they need and what we need also in our relationship with him. And Jesus was saying in Matthew 5:43 and following that we're to
Hmm.
love them and pray for them. And the parallel passage in Luke 6, verses 27 and 28 also adds, do good to them. And
Hmm.
that's the part that I get hung up on
Yeah.
because, obviously I'm not going to, I hope, not going to retaliate in kind or be
Hmm.
mean, and I'll pray for them and I'll love them because, I love everybody. Haha.
Right. Hmm.
But what does that look like? It looks like doing good to them.
Hmm.
And how do you make that practical? You can't just say, well, I'm not prickly in response. I'm not grouchy in response. That's not doing good to them.
Right.
So if we're talking about acting as Fred did with his uncle, that means I'm going to go out of my way to look for ways to make them feel loved and welcome and included and invited, even when every bit of my being's like, oh, I don't really want to do that.
Hmm. Exactly.
But it would
Well,
probably look what happened to Scrooge.
hmm.
I mean, he had an encounter, but barring that, it probably would soften them and change their demeanor
Yeah.
to be given some special attention.
Hmm. Well, that go first and lead the way. When you think about all of the things that are talked about in Romans chapter 12, just such practical things to think about. But I think a lot of times when it comes to relationships, especially marriage,
Mm.
we think, well, he didn't do this, whatever, or we respond in kind
Mm-hmm.
when he says something that's not super nice, then we bark back, or um, if our feelings are hurt. I mean, I don't know if you're like me, but I'm kind of the silent treatment type
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And there's so many times I think, just once I get over it, what was that all about? I'm just robbing myself of peace. But just thinking about go first and lead the way, that just having that definition of it, somebody's got to go first. Somebody's got to do the right thing first. And who's it going to be? And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't Scrooge, but Fred. Fred was able to have an impact on not just Scrooge in the end, but I think he had an impact on his friends, his wife that was sitting around the table. Obviously, we're talking about a fictional character, but I just think he took the initiative and he was kind in the face of unkindness, and he invited regardless of the fact that he had never received an invitation, and Scrooge didn't want an invitation. You just keep on doing the right thing and then do the next right thing and then do the next right thing, regardless of what kind of response you have. So that was just kind of a side note, because I tend to think more about what we're going to talk about next. But I thought, be like Fred, and always go first and lead the way in how we treat others who are not easy to be nice to.
And it is
But
noteworthy that he didn't get a favorable response when he did that.
mhm,
I'm trying to envision myself doing that, like kind of patting myself on the back for I'm going to be so charitable and invite this prickly person,
yeah,
and then they grumble or say no or humbug or whatever,
mm,
I would probably go, fine,
yeah,
see if I ever invite you again. But that's not why we do it. And even if we don't get what we expect, any kind of reciprocation in the moment, um, we can know that we still treated them the way Jesus wanted us to treat them. And perhaps someday down the road, their heart will be softened.
Mm-hmm. It just occurred to me, I was just thinking about everyone at the table with Fred. What if Scrooge had accepted? What if he'd been sitting there with them, not to hear that conversation, but I wonder if sometimes we don't invite people or we don't open our arms to people because of how other people might react. Like, say you're going to a get together where this person is that's just mean. You don't want to go. I don't want to be around that person. So Fred didn't let that kind of thing deter him from inviting his Uncle Scrooge. So it's just lots of things to think about with regard to that situation. But for the rest of the time, I thought we would just talk about what offenses, what things am I doing that I'm suffering the consequences of. And I think there's a lot of things that we do that we're only hurting ourselves. But think about Scrooge, the way he was, and what Fred was saying, that his offenses carry their own consequences. So he had all this money, but he wasn't comfortable because of it. He was so stingy that he didn't even make himself warm. When you think about him going home to that big, empty, cold mansion that he lived in, and there's so many different versions of that movie, so they're all mixed up in my mind. But I think the cartoon version that was Jim Carrey, he lights this little one candle and warms his hands on that candle and not a big fire that he could have afforded. He doesn't share with others and make them comfortable. So what's Tiny Tim's father's name?
Bob Cratchit?
Yeah, Bob Cratchit. He doesn't make his life easier until later, until after his encounter. So he's got the means to help people, but he doesn't do it. And it hurts himself and it hurts others. So I was just thinking about some things. What about being easily offended? If someone is easily offended, how does that make you feel? How does it make you react to them? That's a question.
Like they're overly sensitive and you have to walk on eggshells around them. Be careful about what you say and how you say it. It just makes you not want to interact with them.
Yeah. What is I'm trying to think why would we be tempted to be easily offended? I guess it's just a matter of selfishness and how we think about ourselves only. But that's only another one of those things that we're just hurting ourselves. People are afraid to say things around us. They're afraid to be around us. So I'm not sure why we would want to be that way, but we do tend to be that way sometimes.
Well, some people just thrive on drama also. So everything has to be a thing. Why would you say that to me? Why would they use this tone with me? And they, you're always hearing about, they might be talking about a situation that happened. And as you're hearing it, you're going, I don't get it. What did they do wrong? But they just kind of turn it around into this. They always have to be the victim in the story somehow.
I guess there's some kind of temporary satisfaction that they get from being offended, but in the long run, it just makes it repels people. They don't want to be around that. And I find myself avoiding people that have that reputation, or I'm thinking about someone, and it's no one on this podcast. I'm sure that this person steers way clear of this podcast, but everything she posts on Facebook is a critique or something critical, or I can't believe this, or my hairdresser, I can't believe she said this, or the restaurant we went to today, they didn't do this. Every single thing is a complaint. And I'm like, I don't want any part of that. And, here I am saying I should be inviting her and I should be kind to her and showing her, and hopefully I do in some ways, but it just
so
makes me run the other way. You. Well, I've unfollowed her, so I wouldn't see it. It just, I can't like that. And, I like to encourage people. It feels like sometimes the only kind of reviews we leave are negative. Like if we've been, if something hasn't gone our way at the restaurant, we're going to go leave a negative review. But do we go and leave a positive review if it's been great?
Mhm.
No, we don't do that. We just tend to use those reviews to criticize. So anyway, being easily offended is one of those ways that I think we shoot ourselves in the foot. What if we can't keep a confidence?
Mhm. Good
People
one.
that
Mhm.
I know we're not talking about sharing secrets that we shouldn't, but sometimes you need to talk to somebody and you need to pour out your heart. You need to confide, and you're not going to do it with somebody that is just going to go to the next person and tell them. And
Mhm.
it eventually comes out. I know
Yeah.
that's happened to you. It's happened to me. There's
Mhm.
people that I'll say, okay, let's be careful. I have to watch my words and be careful not to say something that I'm not absolutely okay with being repeated somewhere else
Mhm.
for someone who doesn't keep a confidence.
Mhm. Yeah, and you may give somebody a pass if you were just talking to them and then you're kind of surprised that they shared that with somebody else. But when you specifically say, this is very personal and very confidential, and then you find out that they shared it with somebody else anyway,
Mhm.
very rarely in a situation like that are you going to give somebody a second chance. It's just
Right.
one of those things where lesson learned,
Yeah.
I won't
Yeah.
be coming to share with you or talk to you
Mhm.
anymore.
Or even if it's not something that's just real personal, if it's not something that you just maybe it's not something that is public knowledge yet. Maybe you're
Mhm.
thinking about making a change in
Mhm.
your whatever career, but there's certain people you're not going to talk to because it's not going to stay confidential. So
Mhm.
not being able to keep a confidence, we shoot ourselves in the foot when we don't if we don't prove to be a secret keeper. That sounds kind of negative, and I don't mean it that way, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
What about when we sneak in on the back row, maybe for worship service, and leave before the last amen is said? Or I've heard
Mhm.
this many times at get-togethers. There's people that sit off to themselves, and maybe they look at their phone the whole time. I think there's different reasons for that. Some people are just uncomfortable and don't know who to talk to, and maybe we haven't welcomed them well enough. And so
Mhm.
all they know to do is to look at their phone or to withdraw. But a lot of times, I think especially young people might do this, where they they sit by themselves and then they go home and tell their parents, nobody talked to me.
Mhm.
Or we visit a church and we are there briefly and we say, no one was friendly, but did we approach anyone, or did we
Mhm.
stay there long enough for them to even say anything? So I think
Mhm.
that we we give ourselves a reputation of either being snooty or uninterested in
Mhm.
others when we do that.
Mhm.
It's kind of hard to put ourselves out there, but we have to do it, I think.
Mhm.
What about if we talk about ourselves constantly? We don't say, well, what do you think about this? These are things we've talked about before regarding friendship and things like that. But if we talk about ourselves constantly and we don't ever say, what do you think about this? Or, so tell us where you're from. We laugh about John because before he knows anyone for 15 seconds, he's already asked them where they're from or how they met. It's just a good conversation starter, but we have to be interested in people
Mhm.
if we expect them to be interested in us. What about not being dependable?
Mm.
That's another one that I think if we are undependable, then people are again they'll steer clear of us. So all of these things I was just thinking about. Galatians 6:7 says, whatever a man sows, this he will also reap. So if we're sowing things that are only self-interested, or just not thinking about other people, or just so self-absorbed, then we're going to be by ourselves. If you are self-absorbed, you are going to be by yourself. And we
Mhm.
just really don't want that.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem is we may not recognize our own part in that because I think people tend to accommodate us, talk about meeting people where they are. I mean, everybody can have an off day every now and then, but if this is your general demeanor or, personality or approach, whatever it might be, people just over time start accommodating that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about some of the things that we might, complain about or grumble about or have a problem with, whether it's, on the job or in our marriage or whatever. And do we think to do a heart check and say, did I bring this on myself by, acting a certain way? And some of the scenarios I thought of was, like you said, the woman complaining that she doesn't have any friends, but, she's a cactus. She's just hard to be around because she's so prickly.
Yeah.
And so then nobody wants to be around her, but then she's feeling sorry for herself because she doesn't have any friends and nobody invites her anywhere. Um, the wife complaining that her husband won't take more of an active role with the kids. Well, maybe he tried to early on, but he never could do it right. He didn't give them the bath the right way or dress them the right way or feed them, whatever it is. And so she's always coming and saying, no, do this, do it. And after a while, he just accommodates, I can't do it right anyway. So, and then she starts complaining because he's not involved with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Or same goes for you wish your husband was more of a leader in the home. Well, maybe at one point he tried and nothing was ever good enough or done right. And, it was met with lots of criticism and pushback or whatever. And so, or maybe you're complaining because he's not a gentleman or he doesn't buy you gifts, or maybe he used to, but he always got the wrong thing, that's not the style of jewelry I like or clothes I like or whatever, so people just accommodate over time. They just figure it out too. And they accommodate. And then we're like, hey, what happened? Well, we happened, we did that.
Mm-hmm.
And I can think about that in my own life, with my marriage or my kids or my friends or whatever. At some point, people, if in the friendship, you're the one that stops making the effort to reach out or get together, people accommodate and they're perfectly fine not inviting you to things anymore. And then after a while, you might, hey, how come everybody else got invited but us? So I think that it's not that everybody's out to get us or woe is me, I don't have any friends. I think a lot of times is we've just kind of brought that on ourselves, and the people around us have learned that about us, and they're just content to accommodate and go on their own merry way. It's not like they're going to go home and sit down and think about it. Why are they this way? Why are they doing this? No, they're just going to do what they need to do to get on with life.
I think people don't think long term. They're not thinking ahead. And I mean, I know I've done this. And think about raising kids and how that saying that the days are long, but the years are short.
Yeah.
And when you're in the middle of raising your kids, and it's, I remember very well that there's so much of the menial that we do, picking up after them, just having Jackson here for a few days. And he's a great kid, but he's a kid, so he takes his shoes off where they land, and he unwraps something and leaves it there. So it just made me remember the days that I had kids all the time. And funny, when we got in the car last night to go to Bible class, John said, how do we do this all the time? Because we had to make sure his teeth were brushed and he had the right clothes on and all that. And it was just one, and he's an easy one. And then he goes, oh yeah, you did it. and I thought I did get a little bit of gratification. Is that the right word? Satisfaction, gratification, whatever it is, out of him realizing that it was not an easy time. It was a pretty tough time to make sure, but you do what you have to do in the moment. But, if you don't put effort into your children and seeing what they're interested in, what captures their attention, what is that passage that says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he'll not depart from it. And I've heard so many people say and read things that it's not just about training them in the right ways, but in the way he should go. What way should he go? If one of your children has an interest in designing buildings, whatever, then you channel him in a good direction to I'm not explaining this well, but train up a child in the way he should go. Each one is individual. If you don't recognize those individual needs and wants and pay attention and watch and talk and um, take part. That's the main thing, taking part, because a lot of times, especially now with phones and social media, didn't have that when we had kids. And it's so easy to just sit. And I saw myself do it this week with Jackson. Sit with your phone and text someone, and they're, as long as they're okay, as long as they're not hurting themselves, as long as they're not doing something they shouldn't, then just let them keep doing it, because it's just easy. And really, it's laziness, and that's one of the things I wrote down. But I'm thinking about with my own kids. There was one in particular who loved the outdoors. They all did, but one in particular more than the others. And he did a lot of outdoor things with his dad. And I didn't really take part in it because it was kind of one of those times that I could kind of have a break. And dad was watching out for him, and dad was doing those things. And now he's got those memories with his dad, with John, but he doesn't with me. And that's one of the things when I read this quote, I thought about. I am suffering the consequence of my own offense. And not that, it's not something that has caused any major rift, but
Right.
there's a bond that I think naturally happens with a father and son, that I already felt a little bit of a not I don't even think distance is the right word, but I didn't take advantage of some opportunities that I could have. And because of that, I don't have those memories, and I don't have that bond, and he doesn't remember me taking part in those things. And it hurts me. It's been something that's been painful to me over the years since they grew up and left home. So I don't even mean that I don't think that was laziness on my part. I just think it was kind of a deep breath. Okay, I can relax. And I didn't pay enough attention. So that was a little bit of a side note. but it really is something that I thought about when I first heard Fred Scrooge say that. I thought, well, there's one of those things, that I wasn't thinking long term. I was just thinking about that day and taking a breath, or even a few days when he would take a fishing down at the bend. So I think I just blabbered.
That's
Toss
okay.
the ball back to you.
That's what this podcast is all about.
Blabber. Blabber mouthing.
Well, I started thinking about, when we start having the indulging in the pity party.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, woe is me, and sometimes we do that because it's some occasional thing that happened, and we feel sorry for ourselves. But I'm sorry, I'm chewing up a throat job. But if it's a recurring theme, something that's continually bothering me, that I'm, nurturing this pity party, then it's a good time to really try and spell it out. What is it that's really bothering me, and what have I done to contribute to that? And there are actually several scriptures that are great questions for those kinds of scenarios. And Proverbs 15:1, the second half of that is the harsh word that stirs up anger. Mm-hmm. If you feel like there's a lot of anger in your home, in your relationships or your marriage or with your coworkers, how's your speech? How are you talking to people? Are you speaking harshly? 2 Timothy 2:24, there's a contrast there between looking at someone who is seen as being quarrelsome versus somebody who's seen as being kind to everyone. Mm-hmm. So which category am I falling under? When people spend time with me, how would they describe me? Quarrelsome or kind to everyone? And I think when you use those two words, we know what that means, because we can automatically think of individuals on both sides. I know I can. Yeah. Proverbs 29:11 talks about the person who lacks self-control because they're always giving voice to, they don't hold their spirit back or whatever. But so are you always venting? They're always venting, Titus 3:2, another contrast. Are you someone who speaks badly of others?
Mm.
Or do you show, I love how it's worded, perfect courtesy toward all people?
Mm.
So again, what are the vibes that people are picking up about you when they're around you? Which one are you? James 3:14 through 16. This one makes me cringe a little bit because are you given to jealousy? Do you wrestle with selfish ambition? And I think those two are tied together, you know. Well, if so, that's why you're surrounded by disorder and bad
Mm.
practices, because that particular verse says those things lead to disorder and bad practices.
That was James what?
3 verses 14 through 16.
Okay.
Proverbs 22:24. Are you short tempered? Maybe that's why you don't have any friends, because the Bible says not to make friends with people given to anger, lest you learn their ways. So if you come
Mm-hmm.
across as someone who's always short tempered and losing your cool, people aren't going to need to be around you. And then Proverbs 21:23. Do you always find yourself in the midst of drama? Because this verse says, whoever keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps himself out of trouble. Well, if you're always in the middle of some kind of drama, you're not keeping your mouth and you're not keeping your tongue. And then the last one, 1 Corinthians 13:5. Are you rude or irritable or resentful, or do you insist on your own way? Well, the Bible says that's just not loving. So it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
hard for people to want to be around you. So it just seemed like there were so many verses that the Bible clearly says, if you behave in this way,
Mm-hmm.
this is what it brings about. This is the
Mm-hmm.
fruit of that kind of mind or behavior.
Yeah, it's not sweet fruit, it's bitter fruit that nobody
Exactly.
wants to eat, that
Yeah.
everybody leaves in the refrigerator because it's no good.
Yeah, it's rotten.
Yeah. Well, I thought of similar things, two or three. Well, there were several more than that, but one of them was words, things that we have to be careful about because of how they might, how it how we'll be seen by others. But words, think about the words that we use in our marriage, the words that we use in our relationships. When we get mad, like we were talking about last week, what we should have said, I should have said that. I wanted to say this. But there's a scene in You've Got Mail. I think it's You've Got Mail. It was Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan, and she's sitting in a restaurant waiting for him. Yeah, it's You've Got Mail. She's sitting, and they had agreed to meet. Have you seen that movie? Is that okay? So she agreed to meet him, and they didn't know who they weren't supposed to know who the other one was, but he knew who she was, but she didn't know who he was. And she when he comes in, she's mad at him because he's the one that ruined her bookshop and all that, bought him out or ruined business. And she just says whatever she thinks. And she says something later like, usually I'm one of those people that I can't think of things I should have said after the fact, but there's something about you that just brings out the worst in me, and I can say everything. And I laugh because, and you and I have laughed about this, there's so many things that when we've been hurt or whatever, we're both like, I don't know what to say, but I want to say something. Well, I think it's a blessing to not find the words. Maybe it's God helping us to hold our tongues when we can't think of something insulting to say in return. But, we say those thoughtless or those hasty or those punitive words that usually with our husbands, because he's the one we're most comfortable with. And we know he's not going to go anywhere. Whereas, if we said these things to a friend, they'd be like, well, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. Think about Proverbs 18 verses 6 and 7. It says a fool's lips bring strife. It says a fool's mouth is his ruin, and it's the snare of his soul. We say those words and we regret them later. But you have two choices later. You can either eat your words and apologize, which is what we need to do. Or when there's too much pride involved, we're just going to suffer, and that relationship is ruined. We might not ever get it back, all because of our pride. So it's just like this downward spiral. something is said that hurts our feelings and we react to that hurt feeling and we say something we shouldn't. And then what are we doing with that? The words that we said. Am I going to say, eat crow and say, I'm sorry? Nobody wants to do that, even though we should.
Mm-hmm.
Or just, oh, well, so much for that relationship. Mm-hmm. So words, we've got to just stop and hush and watch our mouths, because nothing good comes from being hasty with the words that come out when we're emotional or mad or whatever. So what kind of offense are we committing that we're dealing with the consequences of? And I think words are probably way at the top of that list.
I just wonder if we feel like we're entitled to say what we want to say and then expect people to give us grace, and that Bible verse is pretty straightforward. It brings ruin. Mm-hmm. And so if we're going to insist on ignoring that because we want to have our say in the moment and we want to give the what for, but then when that ruin comes, then we act all indignant, you're just making a big deal out of nothing. And we just expect people to overlook our very transgressions when we made that choice in the first place by not ruling our spirit and saying thoughtless or even hurtful things.
And what if we are the one who's been on the receiving end of those harsh words or hasty words? What if we were to go to that person who has not apologized and do something kind and good for them, and open the door for them to be able to apologize, or open the door for them to rekindle the relationship? I think we can do that's a go first and lead the way kind of thing that we could do, is not wait for someone to apologize, but yet make it easy. I think we can make it hard for people to do the right thing, or we can make it easy for them to do the right thing. And
Neil and I got in a little tiff the other night. I know that's shocking because we never ever do that.
Okay. Waiting for the lightning strike. I
can't even say that with a straight face. But we get in this little tiff, and usually after, in the evenings, we'll kind of sit in our little chairs next to each other and maybe watch something or whatever. But I was just aggravated beyond anything. And I just went into the bedroom to read a book instead. And I couldn't even read the words on the page because in my mind, I'm doing that mental arguing, like,
that's your best look.
A few minutes later, a few minutes later, he walks in the door and he says, "Okay, I forgive you. You can come in here now."
Oh, no. Was he laughing when he said it?
He was smiling. But at first that. I was like, I know, at first I was like, ha ha ha. And I kind of wanted to say, actually, I really just, I was still mind fuming, but I couldn't do it. He was using humor, and he came in there and said that. And I just kind of looked at him and I was like, wow.
So and he walked over there.
He did. And he walked over there and he kind of repeated it a different way, and I just kind of looked at him and crossed my eyes or whatever. And he goes, "So come on." And I went, "Okay." It was just because it was dumb anyway. I don't even remember what it was, but I know it was dumb. Yeah. But, just using, like you were saying, he didn't wait for an apology. He didn't wait for anything. He just came to me and he basically said, "We're not doing this."
Yeah. Yeah.
Come on in here. I forgive you. Come on in here.
I'm going to remember that. Good. I'm going to try to remember that. Well, there was something you said last week about, we were talking about this words and how we can say things that we regret or angry, what we wish would have said in the moment. And you said something about on TV, they always manage to find the right thing, the wrong thing, really, the satisfying thing to say. And there's been so many times that I remember when my kids were younger and some of those dramas that used to be on TV, and they would be these teenagers and they would do these terrible things, and then they would talk about it, and it was like they had the maturity to work it out. They apologized, or um they handled it the right way. And I always thought to myself, if that were only true, because on TV you work it out in 30 minutes or 60 minutes or whatever, but yet that's not real life. It really isn't. We can't say the right thing. We tend to just completely say the wrong thing and the satisfying thing, or whatever it is, and then we don't forgive one another. We don't find the words to apologize, or we don't wrap it up in 30 minutes. It turns into something bigger and worse. So some of those things that we see, again, we're seeing the highlight reel on TV of actors in a fictional setting. And yet what happens in homes, in relationships, in marriages, in parent-child relationships, in friendships, when we say things, we don't work it out in 30 minutes. A lot of times, a lot of relationships go down the drain because we don't think about what we're saying before we say it, and we don't find the right words to apologize. And so
We're shooting
words,
ourselves in the foot.
we're shooting ourselves in the foot with words. Um, do we have a little bit more time?
Sure.
Do we need to quit? Do we have time for one more?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I thought about laziness, and I mentioned that a minute ago, how when we're lazy, we're going to suffer the consequences of our own actions. In parenting, that was the one that I really thought about. You're only thinking about who your child is right now, but are you thinking about who they will be in 15 years? Because you don't want to take the time to discipline them correctly. You don't want to take the time to teach them self-control. You don't demonstrate the right priorities, or maybe you don't demand respect. And you see a lot of things with gentle parenting now, as they say, gentle parenting. And I know there's some benefits to that, but it really, in a lot of occasions, it means that we're just being lazy parents.
Mm-hmm.
So I unless you want to say something about that, I'm going to move on to one more.
No, go ahead.
Which is choices.
Mm-hmm.
And the choices that we make, and how that can be an offense that we suffer the consequences later on in life. And how many times do I see, and I know you see too, a choice in a marriage that's made quickly, or based on things that we shouldn't base a marriage on. We choose someone because we fall into it. Maybe we haven't been, when we're young, we like the way someone looks, or we like the car that they drive, and that really sounds trivial, but it really does happen. That we go out with some guy because he's got a really cool car, or because he's funny, or because he makes, he's a daredevil, and it kind of feels thrilling or whatever at the moment. Mm-hmm. And we end up marrying that person, and they're not someone that's going to help us get to heaven. Mm-hmm. So, I think about that choice and how we suffer the consequences of that. And it breaks my heart. And I know you as well. So many young women we've known over the years from camps, or from, youth groups, whatever. And we just want to grab them and say, think about this. Think about how this choice is going to affect you the rest of your life, with not just you, but your children and your family, that it's going to hurt when they see how hurt you are. But not just marriages. I think about your companions. And there's something we used to say to the boys all the time: show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Mm-hmm. And if the people that you surround yourself with are not good, morally good, in every sense of the word, not that people aren't going to make mistakes, but if it's not a good choice in a companion, you're looking at your own future. And so I think probably most of the people that listen to this podcast are women more our age. But if we do have younger listeners, I think we just want to encourage you to be really careful about who you spend your time with. And even older people, if you're spending most of your time with worldly people, that's going to come out in your life as well. And it's going to affect you in the long run. And I don't mean to say that everyone has to be perfect, because that's just impossible. Not everyone's going to be perfect. In fact, we're all just walking each other home. So we're helping one another on this walk home. But I think the people that I want to be around me most of the time, the ones that I'm going to go to for counsel or the ones I'm going to go to for comfort, need to be people who are going to point me up, keep me looking up, people who are going to remind me of my responsibilities to God, to my husband, to my children, to my church family. They're going to be the ones that they're my, am I your enemy because I tell you the truth?
Mm-hmm.
They might hurt me with something temporarily, but I know that they're saying those things for my good. So I think companions are a huge, huge choice that will affect us in the long run.
Yeah, and I would say specifically to young wives, please do not spend time with women who bash their husbands. I know toxic is kind of a trendy word, but that is so toxic and it does
Mm-hmm.
rub off on you. And even if you don't come back and start sharing your own, it will affect how you think and see. And but maybe you will start cataloging things for you to share the next time you're with that friend, so you
Mm-hmm.
can do your own husband bashing. But what's that saying? You become like the five people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
So choose wisely.
Choose wisely.
Choose wisely. That's right.
Well, there's a passage, Deuteronomy 30, verse 15 and following. This is Moses talking to the Israelites, and he says, I have set before you today life and prosperity or death and adversity. This is kind of summarizing life and prosperity or death and adversity. And usually we don't think of that broad a difference. We think of small because we have our blinders on. And I don't think of this little choice that I make as being a choice towards death and adversity.
Yeah.
But if it's not really looking towards God, looking up, looking in the right direction, then I'm not choosing life and prosperity. I am choosing death and adversity. And sometimes it really is that simple. But he goes on to say, this is choosing life and prosperity, is to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his commandments, his statutes, and his judgments, that you may live and multiply and that God may bless you. And he goes on to say, if your heart turns away, you will not obey, you will worship other gods and serve them, then you will surely perish. So in verse 19, he says, choose life in order that you might live.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those choices, again, like Scrooge chose to be stingy, he chose to be unfriendly, he chose to shut himself off from the world. Uh, it it alienated him from everyone. He no one wanted to be around him. No one missed him. When I can't remember the order of the Christmas quote angels spirits that came to visit him. But he saw that no one missed him when he died. He was just, it was like a potter's grave, and everyone fought over what he left behind, and he had no control, no say over those things. But yet, those choices, the choice that Fred made to be kind and feel compassion for Scrooge, even when he was a terrible person, that's choosing life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of person that I want to be.
Well, and we've approached this from the negative because the quote is negative. His offenses carry their own punishment, but you have to look at that in reverse also. What's the opposite of offenses? Like
Good deeds or
yeah, good deeds or blessing others, his good deeds bring their own reward or his blessings bring their own reward. And you think about those people that people are drawn to and want to be around. And, there may be a part of us that I wish people liked me that way. I wish people, well, that probably did not just happen. They're just not naturally magnetic and people want to be around them or they're, special, lucky, gifted. No, it's because they have intentionally loved, blessed, been unselfish, been interested in others. That is a Kim Moyer situation or a Joyce Johnson. I've mentioned her name on here several times too because of how people of all ages love her because they have made those choices to be someone that people do enjoy being around. And that's something that we can all do. We're drawn to people who are sweet natured, gentle, joyful. They're not complaining. They're not criticizing. They're not always in the midst of drama. They're always interested in others. They seem to be naturally grateful, even in difficult situations. They always come around and say, but God's got this. And, that's what they've chosen that. They're not
Mm-hmm.
just naturally that way. They've chosen that. And because of that, people want to be around them, want to include them, or drawn to them. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the other side of this also.
Excellent point. I love that.
Thanks.
Their blessings carry their own reward. So
Mm-hmm.
that is something to take from this is the positive side. So it's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Choose one or the other.
Yeah.
Choose wisely. In
Choose
case you just
wisely.
see Indiana Jones in your mind.
That's right. He chose poorly.
Mhm. Well, do you have anything else that you
Nope.
want to add to that?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, do you have something good this week?
I do. This is a hair wax stick. You see that?
Hey, I've never heard of a hair wax stick.
And the brand, it says SNTE. I really don't know what those letters stand for, but SNTE. And it's just like a ginormous lip balm. You can push up this wax thing right there. Can you see that?
Okay.
And so this is for so I'm ditching the dye. So I've got these little wiry gray hairs that have a mind of their own. And you can use this right on your hair to
Oh,
kind
so
of
it's not for taking hair
smooth.
off, but
No,
not that kind of wax.
it's real smooth. It's unscented. It doesn't leave like any kind of film or anything on there. You literally can just smooth your hair down with it.
Huh.
Um, and so I've got those gray hairs coming in they're coarser and they're kind of going. Ah. Do you
Okay.
remember Captain Caveman, that Hanna-Barbera character, Captain
No,
Caveman? You remember him?
no. Who is that?
It was this little brown
Saturday morning
guy.
cartoon?
Yeah, and he always carried a club, but he had like three or four, just three or four wiry hairs sticking up. And sometimes that's who I envision when I look in the mirror and I've got these little random rebel, hairs going. Rah! So, but this helps with that. But also, for younger women that like this sleek ponytail look, you can use it to smooth down your hair. Or if you've got toddlers with the cowlick and you're trying to get a photo, you can use it for that. Or the baby hairs growing around your foot, just all kinds of things. And
Work on
it's
my
really,
eyebrows.
I didn't even think about that. If you have a husband with wild eyebrows, there you go. But it's really inexpensive. It's like, I want to say $7 or $8. And
I'm gonna get that for
that's
John's rooster tail.
there you go. That's my something good
We
for you.
don't leave the house without, well, we sometimes do. He's got hair that grows right here and it sticks straight up
Yeah,
and
I can
looks
picture it. I
like a
know what you're talking about.
5-year-old.
There you go. You just need
Yeah.
to
Okay. Need it. I'm gonna
get
go
it.
Amazon or where?
Amazon.
Okay. Well, my something good for you is an idea that I heard on, I guess it was on the Today Show or somewhere, but it was a little video that I saw that this girl's dad every year had her teacher sign. He went and bought a copy of the Oh the Places You'll Go, the Dr. Seuss book,
Hmm.
and so every year he would have her teachers sign the book, and he gave it to her for graduation. And
Oh,
so
how
it showed
cute.
her, and she was like in tears reading all of the little signatures from kindergarten forward. So I thought this might not
Oh,
be something for people our age, but
I
for you
love
moms
that.
out there, I thought it
Yeah,
was just the sweetest idea.
that's
Because I think
cute.
back on my teachers, I can still remember their names. And I know when you get to junior
Hmm.
high or whatever, you have multiple,
Hmm.
but you could still have each, try to get a signature from each teacher, maybe a little note. But what a memory
Yeah,
to be able to read
that's
something
awesome.
from each of your teachers from
Mm,
kindergarten on. And if you're homeschooling, you can just write a little note yourself as eat for real. I mean, like
hmm.
in kindergarten, this was you, and we did this, and I loved how you did this. Just have a little note on each page
Hmm.
for their ages. So I thought that would be just a really
Cute.
neat little idea. I liked
Hmm.
it.
Good.
Right. Well, as always, I always enjoy talking to you. Always gain a great perspective and listen to your wisdom, and just love the things that you have to say. I love being able to laugh with you too. So thanks for all your input and for the discussion. And I thought it was good. Enjoyed
Me
it.
too.
So
Me
next
too.
week during the week, maybe we can have some discussion on the Looking Up group about maybe some things that we see that carry offenses that carry punishment, or blessings that carry rewards. Make it
Mhm.
a good a positive thing, and So we would love to hear from you on our Looking Up group, Facebook and Instagram. We'd love for you to share the podcast on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Just spread the word. And I will be at PTP next week. So if you're in Branson, come. I think we'll have a booth. I'll have stickers. Come find me. I would like to talk to you. All right. Well, it's been good. So until next time,
keep looking up.
All right. I love you.
Love you too. Have a great week.
You too. Bye.